Hello, everybody. I'm H.G. Tudor, and you can see before you the delightful and fragrant Sam. It's time once again for Tea with Sam and H.G. Today, we're going to be talking about the topic of karma. But before we get into that, first of all, as you can see, Sam has got her brew there. What are you drinking, Sam?
It's just good old-fashioned Builders today.
Builders, there's. I have mine also to hand. That's Yorkshire tea.
Yeah.
It's pretty cold where I am at the moment. It's -8. So, yeah, it is. So, yeah, I'm inside my own heart. So it's particularly chilly. So I have my Yorkshire tea with me. So there we are. But in the absence of something alcoholic that you mentioned just as we were chatting before we came on air, so to speak, about obviously the news that Doug Kramer has died. And we thought that it was pertinent for you to share some of your observations about Doug coming from the empathic view. So perhaps if you'd like to share how it's impacted on you and how you saw his work.
Well, I was absolutely shocked to my core yesterday when I went on your channel and saw that Doug had passed away. I was so shocked and really saddened. And I think, we should raise a toast to Doug and just, well, for me personally, I just want to express a lot of gratitude because Doug for me was who you interact with within your interviews. He was far and away for me my favorite. I just loved the interaction that you guys had. He was just a real, I don't know, he was clearly well respected, really valued. I just really enjoyed the interviews that you had together. And I also watched a lot of his channel as well. I became a subscriber to Doug's channel and just found him to be a really, as you say, enthusiastic, warm, genuine guy. I actually had a chat with Doug about 1.5 years ago. I contacted him just to express my gratitude for his work and just say how much I enjoyed what he was doing. And we had a little chat and yeah, he was just a lovely guy. And also he's an actor and I'm an actress. And so
exactly.
Bit about he was obviously out in LA and has that experience of Hollywood, whereas my experience is very different. But we chatted a little bit about that stuff as well, and I just think it's an absolute tragedy that he's passed so young. It's a real shock and a real loss to this community, and I'm sure we're all feeling the same. Like really, really sad that he's no longer with us.
Thank you. Given the fact, of course, that you never met Doug, although you know full well who he was, and you watched his interactions with me, and you actually had a direct interaction between the two of you. Did you speak on the phone or on Skype, or was it?
Yeah, we had a really quick chat over Skype one day.
Okay, yeah. So you had an interaction there. But given the fact that this was someone that you'd known, perhaps if we could put it in professional circumstances, given that it was in the world of narcissism rather than a friend that you'd made in your day-to-day life and that you'd not met. How does, because of course this is alien to me and I learn from what you all talk about as well, that to my mind, I'm often very cynical about people's outpouring of grief when it comes to somebody that they really had nothing to do with. Now, I know with Doug it's slightly different because we're not talking about, for instance, Diana, Princess of Wales is a good example in this regard, that when her funeral took place, you had the car going through London and you had people crying out and wailing and sobbing. Now, they knew of her, but many of them will have never met her. They'll have just seen her on television. It's this sort of parasocial relationship that exists. But I remember thinking, well, absolutely ridiculous behavior.
Yeah.
Ridiculous.
I agree with you, actually.
Okay. So you don't know the woman, and sure, you can be sad that person has gone, and I understand that you can be sad also because of the circumstances of it. But to actually be there with the sort of wailing and crying, it struck me as rather over the top. But you've just said there that you agree with me here. With Doug, it's a little different because people are closer to him because they, like you have done, they may have interacted with him, they've watched him, they've seen the interaction between him and I. But nevertheless, it's still at distance. And yet, do you feel an actual sense of loss? I mean, what's the sort of physical reaction that you have to all of this?
I think for me, it's more a sense of shock, really, and there is sadness. But I mean, obviously, as you just mentioned, he wasn't like a huge part of my life in any kind of hugely meaningful way. Although I would say he did add a lot of meaning, and certainly learned a lot from him. And I had an affection for him and what he was doing and the work that he put out there. But you're right, it wasn't like for me, I personally don't really get upset about celebrities dying or people that have that sort of distance. I can feel a sadness and I can recognize it's sad, but I don't feel grief, as it were. I felt a lot of sadness when Sinead O'Connor died. That one actually did hit me quite hard, I think, because maybe I felt a stronger affinity with her in some way, or she just more of a part of a fabric of my life growing up. So her death seemed tragic in its sense because, again, she was so young. For me, what I do get upset about when I see people that I don't know is, like, for instance, the war that's happening in Israel and Gaza right now. Like when I see footage of that and deaths there, that kind of thing really, really upsets me. Like, and I can feel a lot of grief around that kind of thing, but I don't feel it necessarily for, I think our lives come to an end and death is a part of life. And so once I see it is, there is loss involved, I kind of have quite an acceptance of death in that sense. And so I don't feel that kind of like misjustice or this is wrong or, to sort of wrangle with it. I can accept death is a part of life and therefore I can accept it more, if that makes sense.
Touching on what you said there, Sam, about the conflict between Israel and Palestine and how that really upsets you.
Yeah.
I assume you have no skin in the game, being neither Jewish nor Palestinian or having relatives there. Okay. And is it a place you've ever visited?
No, I would love to go. I would love to go there. But
so it doesn't necessarily have a direct impact upon you. Yet you see the images that are coming out of there, either formally on mainstream media or less so across social media. Why does it affect you so much?
Well, I think if I saw anybody in those kind of circumstances, it would really upset me because it's just so horrible. I think part of the reason why that this is particularly bothering me is because there's a lot of children involved. And that sort of seems quite prevalent to me. But, just seeing those images and sort of trying to get some understanding of how people are suffering. I mean, the thing is, I know that this is going on all the time and has been since time began. And this, is sadly not an isolated incident of horror within humanity. But, it seems very, very present right now. And so that is, I'm finding it really difficult.
And your responses to it, obviously, when you see the footage, it upsets you the way that you've just described. Does it stay with you, or is it a case of you move on to the next thing and it sort of drifts away?
I would say at the moment it's sticking with me a little bit because I feel a little bit helpless and hopeless. There's nothing that I feel I can do of anything to sort of impact or change what's happening. And I feel like maybe it's just the people that I'm following on social media in particular, so it's coming up more in my awareness just as I go about my everyday business. But it feels like obviously I can get on with other things. It's not stopping me in my tracks and preventing me from getting on with life and the things that I have to do day to day. But it does feel very present for me. Yeah.
Interesting. I have a client through this work who has been so moved by what she's witnessed that she is going to go to Palestine to offer her various skills, be it assisting with rebuilding or interacting with things relating to the children. I won't say more than that to respect her confidentiality. But she was moved so much by what she saw that she signed up to actually go and do something about it.
Well, that's brilliant.
Which is interesting.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for sharing your thoughts about Doug
and
the impact that it's had on you.
Raise a glass to Doug, or raise a mug, raise a cup to Doug.
A mug to Doug, I think is the appropriate rhyme, isn't it? A mug to Doug. Okay.
Thank you, Doug. You'll be sorely missed.
There we are. Now, karma.
Yes.
Boy George once sang about a karma comedian.
He really did, yes.
He did. Yeah, no, he's a nasty piece of work, George O'Dowd. But we're not going to talk about.
HG.
But we're not going to talk about him today.
Oh.
No. Karma. Now, I'll go first, if I may.
Go on. Yes, please.
Because my position on this is pretty simple. Okay. What a load of bollocks.
Okay.
Yep, that's my position. It's very simple. As I am given to understand, there's effectively two versions of karma, and I'm willing to be educated if this is incorrect.
Okay.
Many people apply the concept of karma to mean essentially what goes around comes around. So you do something nasty, you'll get bit on the ass a little bit later in life. And I actually believe that's a misunderstanding of what karma is, because it isn't about you'll get yours kind of thing. It's actually the things that you do and the intent behind them impact upon your rebirthing in a new life. And that's where the impact has. So I think a lot of people actually misunderstand what karma actually is represented as. They think to themselves, so for instance, it's quite typical that I occasionally get insulted by somebody because they see that I'm a nasty bugger. So they'll say, well, karma will get you in the end, HG Tudor. And I just scoff at that, because I just see that as the weak attempts of somebody who's ineffectual, unable to affect me by saying, oh, well, I'm not able to actually do anything against you, HG Tudor, but there'll be this mystical force that will somehow punish you for being a horrible human being. And I go, yeah, okay, you keep believing that if it makes you feel better. And I think that's a lot of what it's about for certain people, that it's simply a device that makes the weak feel better about their circumstances. And they misunderstand it because they think, for instance, that something awful will happen to me because I've been awful to other people, and that will happen in this life. Whereas I understand it, formally, it's to mean that the things that you do in this life will resonate in the next life, put rather simply. And so good intentions and good acts are rewarded by a good rebirth. And it also causes me to make the point to people, empathic victims who raise this issue of karma as well. Given that your life is being made hell by a narcissist, what did you do in your previous life to deserve this? If you believe in karma, you've clearly gone and done something wrong yourself to end up in the shitstorm that you're in. So riddle me that, empathic victim. So those are my views. I simply don't accept the concept of karma, but I do recognize that other people have a differing perspective from me, and that they believe in the concept of karma. So that's the view from the narcissistic psychopath. Now let's hear what the empath has to say.
Thank you, HG. Well, that's very clear. And I do believe in karma. Okay. So, but I have a different understanding of what karma means. So maybe when I express this, it might resonate in some way. So for me, karma is more about action and consequence. And it's when it becomes kind of moralized and put in the areas of rights and wrongs and punishment and deservedness, then I think we're in the wrong place. I think for me, it's more just even Newton's law of, I don't know which law it is, but Newton has a law of, for every action, there is a reaction and a consequence to every single thing that we do.
Reaction, yeah.
That's it, an equal and opposite reaction to every single thing that we do. So the sum of our lives, as I stand here on this day as Sam and you standing there as HG, then our life is the consequence of all the actions and thoughts and everything that we've done from we were born up until now. That has shaped where we're standing right now. And everything that we're doing right now is shaping the future as, our future as it comes. So we need to take it out of the realms of rights and wrongs and goods and bads, but sort of just go, well, if I make wise choices in my life, or if I'm consciously aware of what I'm doing and I aim to lead a fruitful and productive and healthy life, then I can take actions in my life now that will hopefully bring that forward as I move forward in my life. obviously you're also at the mercy of external things of which we have no control over whatsoever, and that also plays a role in how these things play out. But if we're planting a garden and we put seeds in it, we plant the seeds, and then we actually tend to those seeds and look after them and nurture them, then the more likely outcome is that we will have a fruitful garden, and that it will enrich and be abundant, rather than if we neglect it and we don't care about it and we just stick some seeds and throw them around and don't really care about what's going on, then our garden's not going to grow very well. Maybe, or maybe it will. We just don't know. I feel like there is some element of choice. That to me, that's what karma is.
Okay, so is it a kind of reap what you sow principle?
I guess so, yeah, definitely. And it doesn't always follow suit, because it's not even, sometimes we can reap something and we don't know what the consequence of it is going to be. It might not be what we think, because we can't determine everything. But if we become more consciously aware of what we're doing, then, the more likely outcome is that it will bear better fruit. But there's no guarantees. But you're definitely not going to bear any fruit if you don't look after your garden or yourself or whatever it is.
Okay. So you spoke about making wise choices.
Yeah.
Okay. So for instance, all the choices I make are wise ones for H.G. Tudor.
Yeah.
Therefore, the outcome for me is what?
Well, I guess it's what you want it to be, isn't it?
Okay. So basically, I abuse somebody because they're a traitor, so they get what they deserve.
Right.
And therefore that's a wise move for me, because it allows me to control them and draw fuel from them. So my reward for that is what? The fuel that I receive, or is it something further down the line?
Well, I think it's not even about sort of rewards and punishments and things like that. Like, to me, those concepts are narcissistic in their foundation. I don't even think it goes into the realms of morality, of goods and bads, or deserving or punishment. It's like there's just going to be a natural consequence to whatever you do, and we need to take it out of the realms of good and bad and right.
Okay.
It's actually just there is a consequence. So, to whatever we do.
I see. So it's more about whatever you do, there's going to be a consequence from it.
Yeah.
But in terms of that consequence, because people, they do talk about good karma and bad karma. Do you reject that?
Yeah, I do, actually.
Okay.
I do. I mean, because even that idea of like you're being punished for doing something wrong, or you're getting a reward for doing something good, like for me, those ideas are actually kind of stem from narcissism in some way, because I don't believe that people should be punished for doing something, because a lot of the time when we're doing stuff or people are doing things, it comes from a lack of awareness rather than a conscious choice to hurt. Obviously that you might have a different view on that. Sure. I'm sure you do, but in the most part, even unaware narcissists are unaware of what they're doing, and they're not intentionally setting out to harm somebody necessarily, but that's what they need to do in order to feel their sense of control and get the fuel and help them survive, as it were. But it's not done with a conscious intent to be bad. And so
indeed. Well, you can find that there are some narcissists whose behavior is such that they are just very much self-absorbed and bang their own drum and blow their own trumpet, but they don't really do anything that you label as nasty to others. But for instance, they might forget somebody's birthday, but they've not done it on purpose to cause them a problem. It's just that they're so self-absorbed. I always think when it comes to this type of narcissist, a good example of that is the character that Kenneth Branagh played in Harry Potter. Is it Guild? What's it called?
Yes,
Guilfoyle or something.
Or Guild? Is it Lockhart?
Something like that. Yeah, that's right. Thank you. I'm not fully conversant with the Harry Potter universe. So like that, whereby he's not intrinsically horrible, but what he does is he's so about himself that nobody else matters. And it's all about, look at me. And of course, he's full of bluster and lie, etc., to advance himself. But he's not what many people would say, there's no intrinsic evil about him. He's simply wrapped up in himself. And so certain narcissists are the upper lesser type A, by my categorization, is pretty much like that. So coming back to karma, Your perspective on it really is sort of actions have consequences.
Yeah, and
Sure.
and that, you know, if you start to become conscious of how you're living your life, then you can sort of create a more fruitful future for yourself moving forwards.
So in another instance, it might be play stupid games, win stupid prizes, or fuck around and find out.
What do you mean?
Well, if you do something stupid, you end up with a stupid consequence.
I guess so. I mean, it's choice, isn't it? It's like becoming aware of choices that you're making. For example, if you are in a relationship with a narcissist or someone who is abusing you and you are aware of that, if you continue to engage in that relationship with that person, the most likely outcome is that you will become more and more and more and more abused. You know, that life is giving you the information that you need, or the situation is giving you the information that you need. And if you ignore that, or you think it's going to be different, you can pretty much predict what the outcome is going to be. If you stop engaging with that person, you can pretty much guarantee that moving forward, you're not going to have that problem in your life anymore. It's, you know, for me, it's kind of makes sense.
And this approach, is this a sort of an abiding law of Sam's life, would you say?
I wouldn't say I ever sit around and consciously think about karma and what am I doing, but I do, as I have, you know, become aware of the patterns that I repeat in my own life and go, okay, why am I doing that? And how can I stop doing that? Because that pattern is serving me, but that pattern actually works for me. And that actually brings me joy and, you know, and it works, you know, it's not hurting anyone, but, you know, we can all be capable of hurting other people unawarely. And so, you know, as I've, you know, grown to just want to better myself, then yeah, I try to take note of where I'm sort of being, I'm going to say good and bad, but where I'm being useful and of service and, you know, a decent human being. And I can recognize sometimes where I'm not, and I can try and change those things, or where I'm making foolish choices and change those.
I see.
Yeah.
I see. So, yeah, so your perspective is essentially not talking about good karma or bad karma, but it's all the recognition of what you do. It resonates in a consequence, and that you have control over that.
Yeah, absolutely. And what do you think about that, HG?
Well, it's evident that it's quite clear that actions will have consequences, and that we have the ability to make those decisions to choose an outcome. That, of course, could segue into another debate about how much of what you do is predetermined.
Yeah.
There are those that believe that we have no choice. You are just merely acting out an already predetermined role that exists for you. Others would say, well, no, you have free will. You are able to make choices. And then, of course, which is probably closer to it, is that it's an amalgam of the two, that there are certain things that you will, because of the way that you are. So, for instance, I have considerable choice in what I decide to do, but it's within my framework, which is predetermined, which is I get bored very quickly, therefore I need to alleviate that. I must control people. I have a necessity for drawing fuel, not as great as a pure narcissist, but it's there nevertheless. So given my intelligence, my ability, my creativity, my reach, my charisma, all of those things, that affords me, and also the financial firepower that I enjoy, the number of friends that I have, the number of sexual liaisons that I enjoy, all of those things affords me considerable choice. So whereas, you know, contrast it with somebody who doesn't earn a lot of money, it comes towards the end of the month and their choices as to what they might be able to do are more limited because they don't have the money to do so. They might not have the friendship groups to do so. So I have the advantage of all of those things, which affords me considerable choice to do as I do. But nevertheless, I still have that framework within which I operate. So there's an element of it being predetermined because of what I am. My actions, although wide-ranging, must still fit within that framework. Similarly, I suppose for you, you have a considerable choice in what you do. You know, you're a successful actress and voiceover artist, so you've got cash money to splurge here and there. You know, no, you haven't. Oh, okay.
It comes and goes.
Get onto your agent. Tell them to get the finger out. Find you some more work. But yeah, that's the nature of the beast, isn't it? But you're an intelligent lady, you've got friends, you have family, you've got your health, all of those things, so it affords you plenty of choices.
Mm-hmm.
But it comes within a framework of, for you, I would suggest your moral fabric, that there are certain things you just certainly wouldn't do.
Yeah, totally.
And therefore, so I see it as an amalgam of the two, that we have a wide range of choice, but it's within a framework.
Yeah, but it's not even just choice about actions, it's choice about how we show up and how we look after ourselves and things like that. So, what food am I consuming? What news am I consuming? Like you were just talking about this client of yours that's going out to go and support in Palestine,
Yes.
there's so many choices that we can make that are, I guess, beyond just day-to-day actions, that are going to impact not just ourselves, but everyone that is connected to us as well. I have a question for you, which I've been meaning to ask you for ages, and it's about going into awareness. Are psychopaths aware? Is it the same as with narcissists, where some are aware and some aren't?
You'll find that there are more psychopaths that are aware of what they are than narcissists.
Why is that?
I think it's because that with the narcissism, you've got this differentiation between the true self and the false self, which you don't have with psychopathy.
Okay, right.
So that with the psychopathy, the psychopath can know what they are. And also, you see, the narcissist fights against much of what they are in terms of the emptiness that exists. The narcissist fights against that, not necessarily consciously so, but does so in order to prevent themselves being consumed by it. The psychopath embraces the emptiness. The psychopath is entirely comfortable with what they are. The narcissist isn't. That's why something false is created in order to escape what's actually true in relation to the narcissist. And so the narcissism, in creating that false self, looks to shield the narcissist from the problematic stuff, so that they don't have that awareness. The narcissism steps in almost like a kindly uncle that puts their hands over the nephew's eyes and ears when something horrible's happening. You don't need to witness that. We'll steer you away from it, and that means you don't have the awareness. But with the psychopath embraces what they are. They might not necessarily know formally, for example, that they've antisocial personality disorder.
Yeah.
But a lot of the time, individuals that are psychopaths know that they get bored quickly. They know that they get off on hurting people. They know that they don't care about people. They know that there's this emptiness that exists, but that's what I am. I remember seeing something popped up in my feed. I think it was on Quora, where there was somebody else who would be described as a psychopath. And they'd been asked about the fact that you get these individuals. I tend to call them sort of, your edgelord. They want to sort of come on and go, oh yeah, I'm, you don't want to mess with me. But the type of individual that puts on Facebook, you don't want to get in my head because you won't be able to handle what's there. And it's like, yeah, okay, you big yourself up with all that kind of crap. Now, what happens is that this individual was saying, you see these individuals go, oh, it's hell being a psychopath. My life's, it's miserable. I don't have any friends, etc. And this individual responded, go, that's a load of nonsense. It's great being me. And that's exactly right. So whoever that individual was, I can't remember any name associated with it. He knew what he was and he embraced it, because that's what the psychopath does. This is what I am. Now, of course, the more evolved type of psychopath with a higher executive function behaves in a way where they move amongst you and you wouldn't realize. So these are the CEOs, the surgeons, the lawyers, etc., your high achievers. Your low functioning psychopaths invariably are the ones who end up in prison and chewed up in the criminal justice system.
Right.
But both sets have an awareness of what they are and what they do, even if they might not naturally say, oh yeah, I'm a psychopath. They recognize many of the traits associated with it. whereas with the narcissist, most are unaware. So there's a considerable difference between the two.
Wow. Okay. That's really interesting. Thanks for that. I've been really curious about that for a long time. And actually, some of the things you were talking about there kind of, again, got me thinking about karma and how a narcissist has experienced something which has caused the narcissism to step in like an uncle and protect it in some way.
Yeah.
And so therefore, some might think, and I've heard others talk about this, that people that are narcissists are suffering they're in a perpetual suffering, which is as a consequence of an action that happened in their childhood. And that's, to me, that's I'm not saying they deserve it. I'm not going into blame punishment, but that is a consequence of an action that happened to them or with them as a child that has created now this narcissism in later life. It's
undoubtedly so.
Yeah.
Undoubtedly. There's the causation by the genetic predisposition being passed to them, and then of course an appropriate lack of control environment, of which there are lots of different ones.
Yeah.
So the consequence of what has happened to them has created the narcissist. And of course, as you know, most are unaware, and they there, and then you have different schools of thought in terms of there are individuals that feel sorry for narcissists because they think they're a sort of tortured soul. They can't actually help what they do. They don't realize what they are, and they have this ongoing necessity of control and fuel, etc. Although they don't realize that is what they're pursuing, and that they can't see that all the broken relationships are down to them, and they can't see that the problems at work are down to them. It's always somebody else's fault that it has occurred, and therefore feel sorry. Then, of course, there are other people who say, "Fuck them," put them to the bottom of the ocean, set them on fire. Awful human beings after what they've done.
It seems to me I feel like, I don't know, in my own experience of narcissism and narcissistic relationships, I do recognize like incredible suffering in some of those people, and it does I do feel compassion, not for all of them, but in the most part, I do feel like real compassion, especially for the ones that are less successful, if that's the right word to use, the ones that
the only suffering really that a narcissist experiences is when their fuel levels drop or when they're wounded. Beyond that, they don't. It's not like they sit in a darkened room going, "Oh, my life's terrible, I'm lonely, I'm miserable," because the narcissism doesn't let that happen, because it doesn't achieve anything.
Wow. Okay. So I guess then their belief about themselves keeps them, I guess, sane in some way. But to me,
I know
it seems like they're suffering from where I'm sitting.
Many of the clients that I speak to, one of the most infuriating aspects for them is that they're curled up in the fetal position, crying about the loss of the relationship, and there they see Nick the narcissist running around out there without a care in the world, and they go, "How's that fair?" And that's because we have no emotional investment, no emotional attachment. And that the suffering might be viewed as all your relationships turn to shit. You're in and out of jobs. You're estranged from several members of your family. So you would say, objectively, I look at that, and to me, that's suffering. But from the narcissist perspective, he just moves on to the next job. And the reason I lost that was because my boss was an asshole. And yeah, that relationship didn't work out because she was an alcoholic. Because his narcissism tells him that. So in actual fact, the only suffering that the narcissist experiences relates to when they're suffering, when there's a fuel crisis, or when they are wounded. And it's the wounding won't last for long, because the narcissism steps in and immediately compels the narcissist to do something about it through the ignition of fury. So in actual fact, although there's always that nagging itch to go and get the fuel, there's that restlessness, there's never a sense of contentment that's there, but that's not really suffering. It's having like a nagging itch on your shoulder. Okay. But in terms of an actual suffering for the narcissist, it's few and far between, and that's what really gets to people. Is the fact that the narcissist, because the narcissist is driven to keep moving forward to pursue the prime aims, there isn't really the time for the narcissist to sit around. It's the empathic individual that suffers because you're hurt by the loss of the relationship and the way that you've been abused. And the narcissist is just dusts themselves down and carries on to the next thing.
Yeah, I hear you. I know, and that is certainly the case. But is there much correlation between narcissism and suicide? And the reason I ask this is because there's been a recent suicide that I'm in relation to a family member of mine, not my family member, but somebody that they used to be in a relationship with, who I would say has key indicators for narcissism, as in domestic abuser, pathological liar, led a double life, high levels of addiction, and he committed suicide 3 weeks ago. And obviously I can't diagnose him. I don't know that he was a narcissist, and never put him through the narc detector, so we don't know that, but strong indicators there that that's you know, he could have been on that spectrum.
It's
Curious.
It's unusual for it to happen to a narcissist, but it does occur. It might be that the narcissist has some comorbid condition which makes them more susceptible to the risk of suicide.
Okay.
In some instances, a combination of substantial wounding with a fuel crisis puts the narcissist in such a place that it's a little bit like the last man standing in a battle, whereby you're hopelessly outgunned and outnumbered.
Right.
But the narcissist must get that control. So the ultimate act of getting control over somebody is to exit yourself. And by committing suicide, that individual is asserting control over everybody that exists, because I'm checking out now. Ordinarily, the narcissism wants to keep the narcissist alive, because by being alive, you gain control. By being alive, you gain the fuel. And also, the narcissist wants to feel this powerful individual who is superior. So often the narcissist would see suicide as, oh, well, you know, particularly with regard to somebody else, because of the absence of emotional empathy, it's a weakness. Oh, you know, they killed themselves, weak, you know, they couldn't handle life, etc. So they'll be quite scornful about that. Where they've got cognitive empathy, they might be mindful of the circumstances of making such a comment as that. But ordinarily, a narcissist will look with disdain on the issue of suicide, and the narcissism wouldn't take the narcissist towards that, because the narcissist has such an excellent conceit of themselves. Because of the narcissism, it's, why on earth would I deprive the world of me? The world needs me. The world needs to watch what I'm doing, etc. So why would I go? Of course, circumstance could put the narcissist in a position whereby they've suffered repeated substantial woundings and are experiencing fuel crisis. So, for example, they could have been exposed in the national press to have done something absolutely horrendous, which results in family shunning them, friends staying away from them, people in the street giving them fuel by catcalling them, but nevertheless threatening their sense of control. Work has dried up. Nobody wants to provide them with anything. And even their supporters have backed away. So, because sometimes what can happen is even with an individual who has perhaps been made a pariah, they still have a group of supporters somewhere.
Yeah.
You know, even some people who've been accused of, or even convicted of the most awful things, they've still got a group of loyal supporters, which provides them with the fuel, etc., character traits and residual benefits. So that narcissist is able to continue functioning and operating because of those individuals. But if you were to get one, probably somebody who wasn't particularly famous, but they might have been exposed nationally, so that they are abandoned left, right, and center, thus their fuel matrix crumbles, combined with the substantial wounding that they've experienced, the narcissism is really going to struggle to be able to get control, because who do they talk to get control indirectly? There isn't anybody.
Yeah.
And so therefore, it's the ultimate act is withdrawal, and thus they commit suicide.
This is so interesting. Actually, as you're talking about about sort of, you know, being exposed for something, I'm just remembering a situation where a couple of years ago I came across a woman on a retreat, and her stepfather had sexually abused her as a child. And after years of keeping this quiet, she had gone to her family, shared about this. He was on trial. He was about to go on trial for his offences, and he killed himself before the trial could start. And her whole family shunned her because they held her responsible for his death. And I mean, as you're talking about this, I'm now just suddenly remembering this and going, oh my gosh, that man was probably a narcissist, and he was asserting control over this woman. And the impact of it was, that her whole family cut off from her, and he never got to go on trial. So there was never an outcome. Then she didn't get the outcome that.
No, exactly. Justice denied. As you know, there are 3 ways that the narcissist control: directly, which is what the narcissism always favors, because with that direct control invariably comes fuel. So it's double bubble.
Yeah.
So that's what the narcissism always goes to if it can. If that can't be done or it's not working, then it's on to the indirect assertion of control, smearing, triangulation. If that can't be done or it's not working, it's on to withdrawal. Now, ordinarily, withdrawal is F you, and the narcissist walks away from you, or slams the phone down on you, or doesn't respond to a message, or they're not interacting with you and they stay in that position of withdrawal. However, in certain circumstances, the withdrawal might actually be committing suicide, because that's the ultimate flipping the bird to the world, and to say, I'm now stopping the threats to control, because they might be ongoing each and every day. And so the wounding occasioned by the loss of networks, by the loss of job, loss of status, a loss of fame, and the repeated threats to control caused by people going, you dirty pedo or whatever to this person. Ultimately, that narcissist's networks have evaporated. He can't assert control directly, and also he's not fueled enough to compel him to do it. He's weakened in that respect. There's nobody for him to go and smear to say, oh, it's the press, they've got it in for me, because these people, everybody else doesn't want to listen. And so they sit in a position of withdrawal. But the problem they've got is, there's somebody smearing something on their window, or putting their windows through. So the only escape that the narcissist then has is to off themselves. And that is the ultimate act of wielding of power for that narcissist, to say, basically, you can't get me any longer. I've still got the control. And that's where the narcissism drives them. But ordinarily, as I mentioned earlier on, the narcissist is more likely to keep a narcissist alive for the reasons that I explained. So it can happen, but it's in particular circumstances that it will occur.
Okay. And what would you say to those that feel that narcissists kind of get their karma, or get their comeuppance, as it were, as they age and as they become older, and their opportunities to get the fuel and to have the support networks as their friends die, or as people turn their backs on them, as their behavior becomes more obvious and more difficult as they get older? What would you say to that?
The first thing would be, why are you still focusing on what's happening to the narcissist? It's a breach of contact regime. And
okay.
That's the logical response. If you're watching what happens to that narcissist as they age, you're still invested. You should be in no contact. Okay, so that's the first point. However, it might be that that person hasn't seen that individual, but just envisages, that the teeth have fallen out, and that they're, they've got a baldy napper these days, and that they have to wear an adult diaper, that kind of thing. So they envisage that, or they envisage that that's what's happened to them. If you want to believe that and it makes you feel better, well, go ahead, but also be aware, by considering it and thinking about it, you're again breaching your no contact regime, and you shouldn't be thinking about the narcissist. But if we just park the issue of the no contact regime and to address the point that you've made, if you want to believe that, fine. And it does happen for certain narcissists, that, and it's not, some of it is a reap what you sow scenario, because the sort of fast life that the narcissist led earlier on leads to them. So, for instance, abusing drink and drugs, not eating healthily, etc. That revisits them with health problems later on. There are, of course, many narcissists that live to a ripe old age, and they seem like they'll never die. Right. My mother being one of them. But so it very much depends upon the subschool of narcissists that you're dealing with. So there are some whereby the way that they've conducted themselves, lifestyle choices in effect governed by their narcissism, results in poor health. Similarly, choices about relationships results in, when they get older, that they have fewer people around. So, for instance, that narcissist children have been sick of a lifetime of being abused, so they've become estranged from their father.
Yeah.
And that friends have got fed up of always being lambasted, so they don't bother with that person as much. And as that narcissist gets older and perhaps they're less mobile, their opportunities to get out and rekindle networks or replace people in networks becomes reduced. I've explained some of this in the Aging Narcissist videos.
Mm-hmm.
Then the other side of it is, of course, there are many narcissists who take good care of their health, have access to excellent health care, that also, as they get older, that, all right, they might not be able to run the 100 meters sub 14 seconds, but they are still pretty spry and are still able, with a keen and active mind, able to engage in people, have financial firepower. They had huge networks to begin with. They're very well known. And so even though they can have been nasty to people and have done people dirty, as they get older, there's no appreciable deterioration in their function or their fuel matrix. So you will see both sides. It is not the case. Many people will say, and I've had this thrown at me by certain commentators, oh, you'll end up on your own, HG. Well, we all, you'll die alone. Well, we all die alone. Nobody comes with you when you die. I mean, I think what they're trying to say is, you'll be sat there on your own. Well, if that's what happens, that's what happens. It doesn't bother me. We're all going to die at some point. I'm not frightened of dying. I've faced, I've looked at death many times, and at some point it will happen. And if I'm on my own, I'm on my own. I created the blog pieces, and I need to finish these actually, with the Deathbed Narcissist, to give you an idea of what's happening to a narcissist at the point of death.
Right.
But it's often that people want to say these things because it makes them feel better about themselves. Basically, I feel completely impotent. The victim is in a place of, I feel entirely impotent. This person's still got their job. They've gone off with another person. They're carrying on. They seem to be, happy as Larry. This just seems so unfair. So what do? Oh, well, you'll end up dying alone, or it'll get you in the end. Well, some of it might do, but also conversely, that may well not happen. And it isn't the case. And I know there are some people that think that, like, the poison of the narcissism eventually leads to the narcissist becoming this old crone-like individual because of it. Mm-hmm. It's not the case that happens. What you see is, for instance, you might have a somatic narcissist that's so vain that they undergo various treatments, which then don't particularly age well for them. So as they get older, they look terrible. And yeah, exactly. And also that you'll get certain narcissists, but again, not all, certain narcissists, that if they operate within a small area of influence, eventually people realize he's just a horrible old see you next Tuesday. So they think, I'm not going to bother with them anymore. So the neighbors don't bother with them, and the friends don't bother with them, and the family stay away, and they're incapable of broadening their networks for a variety of reasons. So they end up in this crisis situation. But for each instance of where that will occur, there's plenty of instances where the narcissist lives on to a ripe old age and still interacts with lots of people and has a flourishing fuel matrix.
Fair enough.
Yeah. So there's differing outcomes, but it is regularly the case that many victims want to envisage that the narcissist is, sort of Bridget Jones style, going to die on their own, getting half eaten by an Alsatian, in a pool of their own urine, while they're sort of racked by a sudden realization at the point of death of, oh my God, I brought all of this on myself. There isn't. The narcissism won't let it happen. Remember, it's a shell around the narcissist. It's a hermetically sealed self-defense mechanism. There's no moment of, oh my goodness, yes, I'm about to meet my maker and I've led a bad life.
Yeah. When you talk about narcissism, sometimes I notice that it's almost like the narcissism is like a third person or an external thing.
Yeah.
And I'm sort of confused about that a little bit. Is it, yeah, like what, how does that work? Is it a part of, the person, or is it something external that's coming in from somewhere else? I mean, maybe this is
no, it's part of the person. It is
Yeah.
a psychological response as a consequence of the genetic predisposition, the lack of control environment. So it's a way that the brain forms in terms of the way that the personality acts. So it's part of what the narcissist is. I talk about it almost like a third party to try and make it easy for people to understand why the narcissist behaves in the way that they do. By years ago, there used to be a comic strip called The Numbskulls. I don't know if you recall that.
No.
Okay. So what used to happen was there was a man's head, and inside there was like the brain, the ear, the nose, and there was these little minions. And they would see what was going on or hear what was going on, and they would basically issue instructions to the body for it to do certain things.
Mm-hmm.
The way that I describe the narcissism as if there is this sort of committee of minions that forms the narcissism. Right. So I've written about it in such terms, I think, in the Platinum collection, where you have the empathic traits and the narcissistic traits in an individual. But with the narcissist, you just have solely narcissistic traits. And so envy and jealousy and hatred and argumentativeness, they sit around the boardroom table and make decisions to guide the narcissist in the pursuit of the prime aims. So if you like, it's almost as if the unaware narcissist is an automaton that is just sat there waiting for instruction from the narcissism.
Okay.
When it comes to interactions with other people. So it governs those interactions because, like RoboCop had his prime directives, the narcissism's prime directives, i.e. the prime aims, are 1, all appliances must be brought under control and kept under control. 2, fuel must be obtained. 3, character traits must be harvested. 4, residual benefits must be obtained. And therefore, everything that the narcissism compels the narcissist to do has regard to at least 1 and maybe all 4 of those prime aims. So everything that takes place. So I describe it like an entity, almost like a background app that's running there in order to look after the interest of the host, who is the narcissist. So I describe it that way to help people understand the way that it works, but it's not injected from an external place. It's created as part of a response. So emotional empathy forms in an infant child as a consequence of their capacity to have that empathy, and basically the way that they're brought up to share, to cooperate, to be patient, to wait your turn, all of those types of things. So people have different coping mechanisms that have been created. So for some instance,
instincts, isn't it? It's your survival instincts.
That's right. So for some people,
coping narcissism, it's
yes. So for some people, a coping mechanism is they cut themselves. So that's formed as part of their way of getting through life. For the narcissist, narcissism has formed as a means of enabling them to get through life. So if you, in a way, if you imagine you've got a child and they're shunted into the quartermaster's place, and it's right, okay, hello, who are you? Oh, hello, I need a coping mechanism. Right, let me see what I've got for you. Right, here's emotional empathy. There you go. and off they go. And then the next one in, you're going to get some emotional empathy, but also we're going to throw some codependency in there as well. Hello, I need a coping mechanism. Right, well, for you, it's narcissism. Oh, what's that? Don't worry, watch H.G. Tudor. He'll explain. Oh, thank you very much. And so it's almost like at that particular point in your life, you're given a particular type of coping mechanism. And for those individuals with a very strange voice, they were given different coping mechanisms. And one of them was given narcissism. But that's what they are. They're defense mechanisms. They're survival instincts, as you said. They're a method of enabling the person to cope. And with the narcissist, that's simply what it is.
Yeah. Are we going to get any of your Christmas stories with these amazing character voices that you do, HG, this year?
We will have to see. I do have quite a bit to get done prior to Christmas, and I've got some travel commitments. So we'll what I have to do is I think I need to look along the look at my naughty and nice list to see if the Tudorites have been good this year, and if they have, they might find that I empty my bulging sack for them. But
I have always enjoyed your narrations and your stories and your fairy tales. When you do all the different accents and voices, it's most entertaining.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you very much. Yeah, it's a way of making it more memorable, as I always say. Entertaining education is the key. Good. Well, on that bombshell of me emptying my sack, I think that that's an appropriate point to call a halt to the proceedings before
it is as well.
Sam either dies of embarrassment or implodes from laughing. I'm not sure which will be the first. So it all remains for me to say thank you very much for joining me today, Sam, and to let you have the last word to our viewers.
Yeah, just to say thanks so much, HG. As always, enlightening, interesting, and I learn something new every time. So thank you.
Jolly good.